In this video, I want to define the idea of an inverse function. For this, I'm going to start with a one-to-one function f. We want a function g such that f of g of x is equal to x and g of f of x is equal to x. The idea being we want to apply one rule and then apply the second and get back to where we started. So it's a way to undo a function. And this is known as the inverse. And we tend to denote it by f to the negative 1 of x. Here I have two functions, 10 plus 5x and 1/5 x minus 2, and I want to know if these are inverses. I'm going to start by finding f of g of x. This means f of g of x, which is 1/5 x minus 2. So we're going to take our function f, and everywhere we see an x, we're going to replace it with this. F says 10 plus 5 times x, and instead of x, I'm going to write 1/5 x minus 2. Multiplying this out, I have 10 plus 5 times 1/5 is 1, so plus x, and 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. And 10 minus 10 is 0, so I'm left with just x. Exactly what we needed. We now need to check the other direction, g of f of x. So I'm going to start with what I know f to be, 10 plus 5x. And everywhere I see an x in g, I'm going to replace it with this. G says 1/5 times x, but instead I'm going to write 10 plus 5x minus 2. 1/5 times 10 is 2, and 1/5 times 1/5 times 5 is 1, so I have 2 plus x minus 2, which is equal to x. So yes, these functions are inverses. Let's look at actually finding an inverse of a function f of x. The first step is to replace f of x by y. Instead of writing f of x, we should write y. The second step is to interchange x and y, so I'm just going to flip my two variables. The third step is going to be to solve that equation for y. My first example, f of x equal to 4x plus 3. Step 1 said to replace the f of x with a y, so I'm going to write y equal to 4x plus 3. The second step said to interchange x and y, so instead I'm going to write x equal to 4y plus 3. Step 3 wants me to solve for y, so I'm going to start by subtracting 3 from both sides. That gives me x minus 3 equal to 4y. And then I'll divide both sides by 4 to get that y is equal to x minus 3 over 4. And then my fourth step says to replace the y with my f inverse notation. So I have f inverse of x equal to x minus 3 over 4. So now I have my inverse. I now want to find the inverse of g of x equal to the square root of x plus 2. My first step, instead of g of x, I'm going to write y equal to the square root of x plus 2. My second step is to switch the x's and y's, so I have x is equal to the square root of y plus 2. 3 wants me to solve for y. I'm going to start by squaring both sides. The left becomes an x squared, the right becomes y plus 2. I can then subtract 2 from both sides. That gives me x squared minus 2 equal to y. And then my fourth step is to switch to my inverse notation. So I have g inverse of x is equal to x squared minus 2.